Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me again today Celina Souffrant. I am so excited to have her because it's not very often that I invite people to come back and do another session or two, and she will be back again for another session as well. As we talk about sustainability, one of the things that so much discussion has gone on about being green, how are we environmentally responsible, and what does that really mean? So just to remind you all, Celina's background is in marketing. She has done a great deal of work in the area of sustainability, working with NGOs, looking at how you can use that within your brand, and with startups, putting it into the thought process right from the beginning, and then doing marketing and branding. So Celina, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to get started on why sustainability. How does one use that for their brand?
Yeah, and I think the first thing I'd like to open up with is a couple of different statistics. So the first is from data that I found last year that 93% of consumers are more likely to buy a product if it has some kind of sustainability metric attached to it. So first of all, that's kind of astoundingly huge results, right? 93% of consumers are going to buy your product or are more willing to if you have some kind of certification or you're communicating sustainability in your marketing, right? The second thing is sustainably produced or sustainably marketed products they move 5.6 times faster off the shelf. So again, these statistics to me indicate that sustainability, it's not even a growing trend anymore. I think it's kind of become our new state of normal. And especially with the acceleration of COVID and kind of safety concerns and really transforming the shopping experience, I think that people really want and need to feel good about the things that they're buying. Consumers realize they have so much advocacy and so much power of choice now that if you don't have some kind of sustainability initiative or some certification on your label, it actually is going to harm your brand reputation. And so when you talk about the why of sustainability, I think that those statistics kind of address that right from the get-go, that, it's not something extra. It's not something that, you have to go out of your way to get. Like, it's something that is expected. And I was reading a really interesting article yesterday about costs, right? Because a lot of people think that when you're investing in your cost, you want to be cheap if you're a startup, if you're a smaller brand. But when you're, quote unquote cheap, it can actually be more expensive for you in the long run. So if you're not willing to invest in the best type of quality, if you're not willing to invest in your sustainability up front, those types of things are going to cost you later down the road once you have your customer reviews, your word of mouth referrals. Or even with, employing and staff and stuff, if you're hiring people who are a lower rate, but maybe they don't have the experience that your brand needs, especially if you're a startup or you're trying to grow, that all of these choices are going to hurt you down the road. So even if it looks like, investing in a certification, getting your product certified as organic, or, kind of taking these extra steps to ensure that you are meeting the baseline standards that are demanded by your consumers, it's a willing investment that you need to make, and you need to see it as exactly that. It's an investment. It's a long-term strategy. You're going to see the ROI on it later via your sales growth, via your brand awareness, and, kind of your consumer likability index. All of that's going to come back to you. But if you're afraid to invest in that early on, it's going to hurt you down the road. So I think that's kind of addressing the why of sustainability, and why for me, it's a no-brainer. You have to do it. You absolutely must. I think if you're a service-based organization, you have a little bit more flexibility in your choice if you want to do, and we can kind of talk about some of those certifications later in the conversation. But for product-based, it's a must-have. For me, I just feel like there's not, even if you look at larger retailers like H&M, they keep building out their sustainability lines using recycled products or organic cotton. So even when you see like retailers at that, or even Zara, for example, like at that level, when they're doing it, you have to do it. So that kind of is the why. And the how, there's a lot of different ways to get into sustainability. And again, we can kind of, delve into this more in the conversation. But, the baseline way that I always recommend is first looking at your mission as a company and what is your brand? What do you represent? Because you want to be authentic in your sustainability and you want it to make sense in your brand story. It can't just be a slap on because you're trying to sell more products, right? So if you are someone who is targeting women, or you're like, hey, my products are, really about, whole body empowerment or something, you wouldn't want to just slap on, a rainforest alliance, if you have like a female product, and what I'm trying to say is that the certification and the mission have to align. You can't just look at the first thing. You can't look at the cheapest thing. Really try to think about what is my mission? What type of change are we trying to create in the world with our products? And then now along that impact journey, what certifications will fit in?
Celina, so much, I think, part of it's a game in terms of what companies do, and consumers have gotten smart to that game. So what are some warning signs that companies need to think about so they
100%.
don't get lost in that game?
100%. And so that warning that you're talking about is known as greenwashing in the industry, where consumers recognize right away that they're just putting the word sustainable, on top of something, or ethical, right there, or even, gluten-free and vegan. Like, it's not even just about the social, like when I see gluten-free water, it makes me want to puke, because I'm like, obviously water is gluten-free. You're just trying to add those trending words to get my money, And so, I think there definitely is a fine line. But again, that's why there's power in certifications and third-party verification. Last time we talked, I brought up Starbucks and was saying, I'm a big fan of Starbucks. I think that they've done a lot of wonderful things, even though, some of their initiatives aren't always on point, right? And when they started, they actually invested in fair trade certification. And over time, they developed a really close relationship and had a lot of positive impact generated. Then at a certain point in their development, I'm not sure if it's because they got too big or if it's because certification became too expensive, they veered off from Fair Trade USA as that certifying body and developed their own internal, what they call CARE, C-A-R-E, practices that basically cover, in their words, kind of the same types of standards socially and economically and environmentally that Fair Trade certification does. But, in their words, they're saying, well, we're big enough. We've done this for a long time. We can, audit our own processes and deliver a really good product to you. And some consumers are so enamored with Starbucks, and that's kind of been the way of life for, a decade or more. They're like, that's fine. But to new consumers, they're not going to buy that, because it's, it's easy for you to say you have a wonderful program, but if there's nobody on the outside, inspecting it and verifying that you're living up to the standard that has been internationally set, that other people and your competitors have to, hold themselves to, that's where, there's going to be that doubt. So that's, again, coming back to this conversation of having that third party verification is everything. So when companies have labels that just have words, there's no certification, or they're saying, we do this ourselves, I think that that's where consumers kind of see. And I think also it goes down to your social media and your digital marketing and really the channels that you're delivering your brand message on. If you're not showcasing photos of your producers, if you don't have, testimonials about the impacts that you've generated, if you're not publishing impact reports that are showing the dollars that you're investing, or that, whatever that quantifiable impact is, whether it's you're planting more trees, you're supporting, children around the world in certain areas, you're, providing jobs, you have hours devoted to, employees giving back or volunteering. If you're not showing any of that, then it's very obvious that it's just fluff greenwashing.
Okay, so I think that's an important thing to talk about, because on the one, there's so many things. Like with it, there are things that we talk about in terms of being sustainable that make sense. FDA can approve things to be ingestible, but would you really ingest it? Right? The dollars that go into that product may be ingestible, but the product is not ingestible.
Yeah.
So we put those labels on, but it doesn't have real meaning to the consumer. So I like your point about that. And the other is relative to the service industry. There are a lot of companies that may not have products that they may be at some point in that manufacturing process that they can't really show what they're part of it, but they surely can show when they have impacted lives. And so
Yes.
stories about that is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that that's a topic that a lot of people, don't really know that answer to for service, because again, products, it just goes down to your supply chain, right? So it's really easy to kind of measure, okay, what are we doing? Are we trying to, be sustainably, in terms of environmental kind of initiatives? Are we looking at people? What are those kind of things? Are we sourcing organic? Are we, looking at FSC certified wood? Like, what are we working with? But when it's service oriented, it's easy for a lawyer or a business coach or, any other service kind of organization to say, well, I want this to still be my competitive differentiator. I want to show that I care about these things too. What do I do if I don't have a product? So there's a couple of different certifications that you can leverage there. The first that we talked a little bit about last week is your B Corp certification, which is showing, that you have a sustainability commitment to your employees, to your local community, and then also those environmental and social outputs. And all of those things are measured in a third-party audited test. So B Lab is a nonprofit arm of the company B Corp. And basically what they do is they give these really long assessments to these businesses who have to fill it out and prove, show their financial statements, get employee kind of feedback and statements. And so it's a really open verification process that incorporates, all of the different stakeholders. And then it culminates in a public score that will go on B Corp's website. And so, for example, Patagonia is a B Corp. Ben & Jerry's is a B Corp. North Face, I believe, might be one. I'd have to check. But there's thousands of companies that are B Corp certified. And so if you wanted to differentiate yourself, that's definitely something that you can do. And it's cool because they actually work with you on marketing, on that impact development, your stories. So if you want to do it, but you're not sure how to talk about it after you've put in all of this work, that's one option that you have. Another one is if maybe you're someone who's a little bit more green, oriented, you can get a LEED certified building, or you can apply for the Green Business Association certification. And those things are showing that you are being sustainable within your office environment. So, if you have a lot of clients and maybe you do have an office space, it's showing that you're recycling and that you're trying to keep your carbon emissions low, or your electricity and your energy is, kind of being sufficiently managed. Like those are things too. And again, it comes down to your brand and kind of the story that you want to tell, and what vehicle is going to help you best, demonstrate that story and what you care about.
It's telling that story. What's interesting is one of the things I think people might be interested in as they listen to this, Celina, is what are the resources? So if in our show notes, as we go through this and next week's discussion, I would like us to have a list of references where you can go and who to contact to get some of this information. Because I think part of why it doesn't happen is A, it seems overwhelming, B, it seems too costly, and C, who do I talk to and which one matters the most.
Yeah.
So if I were to look at from a product standpoint, whose certification is the most important? I think fair trade obviously is, one of them. And then right. And then others, are there others that are also very important?
Yeah, of course. Again, it comes down to your product. If you're selling, I've worked with companies that make beautiful wood or home furnishing. So for them, they're looking at the FSC Alliance. And that actually, let me just look this up 2 seconds. That is just so I don't butcher the name. I actually don't have it on my list here, but FSC, I think it means the forestry certification or forestry standard certification, but I'll definitely include this in the show notes. But FSC certified wood is a really big one. Rainforest Alliance is another one. Again, if you're looking into kind of more like wood sourcing, organic certification is always great for food or for clothing. You can also look at the organic textile industry. That basically is, again, purely cotton. So, for example, I believe that is the certification that H&M has on their cotton clothing. So it's not just about organic. You can literally buy because again, you can either have your supply chain certified with a third-party auditor, or you can just buy already certified products. So there's kind of two routes to market that you can choose based on the level of investment that you want to put and then the type of money that you want to spend. So that's kind of another option too when you're talking about, okay, if I'm a business owner and I'm busy, I want to do something great, I don't have the time to kind of build out a whole thing. There, again, are options where you can actually, for example, Wholesome Sweeteners is one of my favorite fair trade sugar companies, and they wholesale to other bakeries. So when I had my baking company, I would purchase their agave, their honey, they have a bunch of different types of sugar, and I could say that my cookies were fair trade because they had fair trade ingredients in them. So that's another way for you to kind of enter into the spectrum and to have that story, but you're not taking on the burden of building out your entire supply chain.
Got it. Okay. So let me ask you something else. One of the things everybody uses is freight. If you buy from overseas, you've got shipping freight.
Mm-hmm.
We vacation sometimes on cruise ships.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is getting a lot of attention right now is what's happened to the oceans.
Yes.
So
Oh my gosh.
is
Yes.
there a measurement that's being done that says, okay, I use freight. Yes. I do go on vacations and cruises. Yes. And they are being monitored and indexed this way. Is that happening?
Yeah, for sure. So again, there's kind of two routes that you can approach. So when you talk about the ocean, you could talk about fish, or you can talk about what it sounds like is more like the energy kind of emissions. So if you're talking about fish and you're like, I'm on a cruise ship and I want to only buy sustainably sourced seafood, or I want to sell sustainably sourced seafood on my cruise ship because I know it's going to be a hyper aware issue because we're in the ocean, then you can look at something called the Marine Stewardship Council, or there's like the Green Seal certification is another good one. And then the last one is, let me see if I can. The other is the Best Aquaculture Practices certification. I kind of, in preparation, had my whole list of certifications so I could kind of call them out, and that's why I can definitely include them in the show notes too. But so that's kind of one way, right? Because there's been a lot of, even within fair trade, they now have fair trade seafood. So that's kind of one avenue that you can go through, is actually thinking about how are you sourcing your seafood if you're a restaurant, if you're a chef, if you're a cruise ship, a hotel, etc. Then on the other hand, again, it's coming back to those carbon emissions. So that's where you're going to look at more things like, are you recycling? What is your waste looking like, right? So that could be something more of like the global, it's called the GAP certification, where that's your global agriculture and your business practices. So that's talking again about what are your sourcing and how are you actually investing energy into lowering your green or increasing your green footprint when you're sourcing things. Another thing could be Green Seal certification. That deals with actually sustainability within the ocean. So it really, again, goes back to what is your mission and your brand kind of promise? And are you talking more about your sustainability footprint in terms of decreasing? Are you trying to reduce things? Or are you more social and trying to increase things? Are you trying to pay people more? Are you trying to provide better working conditions? And you can do a mix of both. But again, I think for your profitability model, it's definitely, as you had said earlier, kind of thinking about, as you're thinking about your supply chain, you're thinking about your business, your branding, identify what you want to do in a scorecard. So when I'm working with clients, normally what I'll do is kind of think about, all right, what are the top 3 areas of importance to us? Then what do our customers care about? Then as we're kind of trying to align these, then you can really identify, okay, then if these are the, if we give it like a rated scoring system, we could say that, okay, the top 3 things based on a weighted average are X, Y, and Z. Now let's feed that into our certifications and say, okay, which ones are going to have the most, results or impact for the spend that we're giving. Start there, see how it works with your consumers, see if they, in the social media, in your email, what are the responses that people are giving you, and then you can scale out later. But, just start small and start where you're at.
What is the cost of being environmentally conscious and communicating that? What is, there obviously is a cost, or more people will get.
Yeah, I mean, they're all different. And the thing is, I can't really give any numbers because, first of all, I'm not working for those organizations. So I can't give I can give a ballpark number. I mean, it's definitely going to cost you 3 to 4 figures for sure, but it depends on the size of your business and then ultimately what you're trying to do. So like with fair trade certification, for example, you're paying a certain fee for the auditor to go and actually check, and then you might be paying additional premiums for the coffee that you're sourcing, right? Or the cotton that you're sourcing, or whatever it is. So with that model, there's 2 cost structures. With organic, it might be a little bit different. If you're doing something like LEED certification, you're going to have to pay something different as well for that. And LEED, I believe, is measured on the actual square footage of your building. So again, if you're a small business, your cost structure is going to be really different than a bigger one. But on the flip side, if you're a bigger business and you're really investing a lot, and maybe you have a few different supply chains going on at the same time, you might be able to work with one certifier and say, okay, well, because I have all of these things, let's work together and try to get a little bit of a discount because I'm investing all of my money into you, and I've already kind of met the bar on these two. So maybe that can kind of lower the cost for this other one. So there are definitely ways to build it out. And I think that there's no one size fits all. And each certification does have its own kind of measurement or payment system. But ultimately what you're going to be doing is paying for the audit and then actually paying for the goods and the materials.
If a company pays for this, ostensibly you could go through the whole process and have the certifying body come back and say, yes, in this area, this area, you do well. This area, you don't, right?
Yeah.
So go through that a little bit. What's that process like?
Yeah. And that's not rare. That's usually the norm. Most people aren't going to get it right on the first try. Right. And so that's where you have to have that relationship. And with certifiers, it's definitely not a one and done type of thing. It's an ongoing process where you're constantly kind of asking them questions and you're investing into your supply chain. I worked with a moringa startup company that met with their supplier 3 times over a year before they finally got up to code with their organic certification, because there were so many things. They were processing moringa. So they had to grow it. They had to wash it and make sure it was clean. Then they had to actually build their own factory to be able to heat process it at a low temperature so that when they went through the FDA and had like a whole bunch of like food certification kind of people coming through, they were just on a basic quality level, were meeting that quality without losing those nutrients. Then on top of that, they had to worry about their organic sourcing and all of the other certifications. So I would definitely say, don't go into this thinking it's going to be an easy one and done kind of deal. And I think that certain certifications might be different. Again, like I said, if you're purchasing, sugar that's already fair trade and you're just putting it in your products, that's a one and done type of thing because that sugar company is doing the work for you. But if you are literally trying to make your own supply chain organic or fair trade or whatever it is, you're going to have to invest that time and money to be able to make that happen. So that's, again, where I say, like, if you are a smaller brand, especially if you're like clothing or food, for your first kind of dipping your toe into the water, definitely just purchase certified goods and then scale out later as you grow.
Got it. So there's a lot of challenges, aren't there? And when you look at the brand and you're trying to develop the brand, and you're talking about some of the pieces that go into it, I'm also thinking, and you're strong in this area of marketing your brand, right? So much of what we do with products involves packaging. And packaging, I look at that so many times because we have discussions in our own family. Well, look at all the waste. You fold up this and you throw it. You have this thing that came in this plastic container. You can't fold it up. It's just that plastic, and you put that in the recycled plastic bin. And is that necessary? So what are some of your thoughts about branding, packaging, and being environmentally conscious?
Yeah, and I love this topic. This is actually something that I dove deep into. I think we talked about this last session. I've created basically a Start Your Own Business course that's kind of my journey, my MBA, all kind of condensed into one kind of 6-hour course that anybody could take. It's on my website. I can link that in the show notes. One module is specifically dedicated to the packaging experience because I always tell people your packaging is your best sales rep. That a lot of times is the first, touch point that a consumer is going to have with your brand, and you're not there. So that packaging has to speak, volumes as to who you are, what they can expect from you, and what you care about. So whether that's on the shelf, if you're wholesaling and you have a retailer like Target and you've got like a bottle, or if you're direct to consumer or an e-commerce store that's shipping in a box, there are so many factors to think about. And it almost has to be like a magical experience. Like you want to think about how do they feel from the first second they touch it, then as they're interacting and playing with it, when they use the products, and then afterwards. And you want to have an exemplary experience so that they are talking about your product either on social media or to their friends. Right? Because both of those avenues are going to be great for your business growth. And especially on social media, if you have unwrapping experiences, like that's why Apple has gotten so big, because so many people film themselves, and with Apple's packaging, I don't really think it's that sustainable, but what it does is really feed into that kind of next level quality and the sleek design and the colors and everything fits, perfectly tight together. Like that is the experience. So when I'm working with brands on sustainability packaging, there's a couple of different things that you want to think about. So I'm going to talk about the e-commerce experience and not necessarily the at shelf, just so because there's a couple of more kind of considerations. So the first thing that you want to think about is your actual box that's getting shipped in. And there's really easy ways for you to work with the larger mail carriers to get either sustainable packaging, or you can have your own branded packaging where you're putting tape. You can create your own boxes that you're shipping directly from your store or from your factory or whatever, to make it easier. So you actually have that in control. And even if that isn't within your cost structure and you would rather just go with, UPS or FedEx and their packaging and labels, like that's totally fine. After you have them opening that box, you just have to think about that first impression. Do I want it to be a generic box, or do I want to have something beautiful? Like, for example, one of my favorite companies is called Natura, and they are a B Corp. They are from Brazil, and I actually have a little like lotion right here, Natura Brazil, and everything they do is made out of recycled packaging.
I have been to their company. It's fabulous. Yeah.
Okay. Love it. Yes. And so their big thing is sustainable sourcing and giving back to, biodiversity in the rainforest and working with indigenous communities. So the way that they kind of convey that message is through, first of all, having a beautiful box that's made of recycled packaging, like recycled wood. You open the box, and within the box, I've seen two different things that have really impressed me. With Natura, they have like shredded cardboard little strips. That's their stuffing. And you can already tell just by looking at it that it's sustainable. And it's just a beautiful color too, because their packaging is like bright pink or yellow. And then you have this beautiful kind of neutral brown. So visually, it's still like appealing. And I know as a consumer right away, this is recycled material. So I already feel good before I've even gotten to the package. Another company that I'm obsessed with is called Lush, and they've been around for like 20 years. Their whole thing is plastic free. They support same thing. They have a lot of indigenous communities. They're really big into, ocean conservation, and they kind of take on environmental and social activism as like part of their platform and part of their identity. And they have these really cool, they almost look like cheese puffs, like those little orange snacks that are, you know what I mean? And they have like a little funny, like powdery feeling. Those little thingies are made out of potato starch, and they come in every box that you get from Lush. And when you're done, you can wash them down the drain, and they're biodegradable.
Oh, interesting.
So it's such a funny little, so there are different ways for you to incorporate that. And again, you haven't even gotten to the product yet, and you're already communicating to the consumer that this is something that we care about as a brand. Then once you get to the product, you're going to start thinking about your label and your story. Some brands will include a little place card of the artisan that made the product. I worked with a coffee company that did an excellent job of that. They had like 20 different workers take photos. On the back, they each had their little impact story, and they would hand sign it. And then you never knew which artisan you were going to get. So, that's a really cute way to, again, keep driving home that fun little, and then they have freebies that they're touching, so it's a great way to kind of keep that impact story going, or even something like a handwritten note on sustainable postcard material. If you're a really small brand, goes a long way because it shows, again, that you're committed to sustainability, but you're also dedicated to your customers. So that's just another added level of excellence to the customer unwrapping experience that will, really create that brand loyalty. Then the last thing, which is funny because most people think of it as the first thing, but in my mind, it's the last thing, is the product, right? Now you've opened the box, you've seen the cute freebies, now you're actually at the product. And that's where you make sure your brand name is clearly displayed, and your story, and your ingredients on the label are all, really clear and easy to read. And that's where you're going to place your certifications. And something that a lot of people don't know, you actually have to pay to put certifications on your label. So that's another cost that we're talking about, because again, it's more of like a licensing scheme. You can't just say something's organic. Like you actually have to get approval from the organic or from the fair trade or the FSC, whoever it is. And that's a way for them to be able to kind of increase their profitability in their business models, because a lot of them are either nonprofits or they're social enterprises. So you paying that licensing fee for the rights to put their label on your product is a cost that you have to incur. But again, it's something, I've seen products both ways. I've seen them with the certification, and I've seen them just say our products are sustainably sourced. And I think 9 times out of 10, the products that have the labels inspire more confidence with consumers than just that, trust us, we're doing this.
Right. What are the downsides? Any downsides?
To investing in sustainable initiatives, or?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, cost is one. For sure. I mean, it's gonna be more expensive, like upfront right there. If you're someone who doesn't have the option to invest in that can be a downside. The second thing can actually be the perception of your brand, because some people, it can polarize, right? Some consumers are like, especially with coffee, fair trade coffee has become a very not hot topic, because this discussion has been going on for a long time, but some people think that fair trade coffee isn't as good as direct trade. So if they see fair trade on the label, they're not going to buy it. And like with organic cotton, it's kind of the same thing. People think of, okay, if it's an organic material, is it going to feel as good on my skin or is it going to be itchy? I prefer synthetics. So that's where, again, that market research comes into play. And when you're thinking about this, and like I had said, you have what's important to you and what's important to your consumer. For every brand, I think that doing, leveraging customer insights, market research is essential, whether that's once every 6 months or once a year. Whether it's through, you can do a survey to your email list if you have a lot of subscribers and say, fill out this survey and we'll give you a 15% off coupon. Or you can call, if you've noticed in your database, you have repeat customers, call them and say, we'll give you a $50 gift card if you give us an hour of your time. Trying to think about different ways to get those insights and asking customers these questions. What's important to you? What do you like? Would this, inspire you to buy, or would it detract you? And if you don't have customers yet, you can still leverage social media avenues to get that information. Like, you can do Amazon reviews, look at other fair trade products and see what people are saying. Go to Facebook groups and see, what people are asking, major, fashion brands or whatever, category your product is in. You can look at influencers and see what influencers, how are they promoting products and what are the comments on their feeds telling you? So there's a bunch of, you can even go to blogs. I mean, the internet is definitely your best friend. And if you do ample research before you invest in your sustainability strategy, it's going to pay off a lot more for you in the long run.
I think this is going to be so much more important. It's important now, but it's interesting. It's become the most talked about thing in education. And I was listening to my granddaughter's graduation from 5th grade in London. And every single speech, every one of the students gave a speech. It's a virtual graduation this year. And every one of their speeches was on sustainability.
Yeah.
And I thought, what, years ago, there would have been more variance. Mm-hmm. You would have heard some people talking about, I don't know, becoming a doctor or, some professional dream. But every speech was about sustainability. And I thought, wow, this is a whole new group that's coming up, that it is their belief system, that it's like breathing air. One must do it. Right?
Yeah. And I think especially the trends with, not even trend, but the traction that like people like Greta Thunberg have brought to the movement and talking about climate change. And one of the big trends that we haven't actually talked about yet is plant-based alternatives. And that's not necessarily a certification, but, a lot of companies are thinking about investing in plant-based lines, especially when you look at brands like Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat, and all of the impact that they're generating by trying to get people to eat less meat. Because if you want, and I'm vegan, so I'm definitely biased. I'll try not to preach too much about it, but it's just when you learn about how destructive, the farming supply chains are, when you're looking at dairy, beef, even milk, because dairy and beef are two different types of supply chains. Even though they're both cows, they're treated a little bit differently. And when you look at the runoff and the negative impacts, and even when you think about small scale farmers or vegetable farmers who aren't receiving the same subsidies from the government, so they have to charge more, all of that comes into play. And I think that consumers really are just waking up to the power of your dollar, and where you choose to spend it has an impact. Every single person can make a difference. And so when you lead with that narrative, and so many companies are nowadays, that really helps in your branding as well, because it makes the consumer feel like you're in this together. You're creating this amazing product and you're giving them the opportunity to join with you as an activist to be able to make the world a better place while they're still getting the pleasure of having their needs met.
Celina, it is. We have been talking for half an hour. I don't know if you realize that, but this time goes so fast.
It goes so fast. Yeah.
So fast. So for all of you who are listening, we're going to continue this discussion, and we're going to come back next to talk about what are some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because I just think we all need to be educated. And the other thing that Celina has offered is to put together some of these lists of resources. And then it also will, if you would be so kind as to share your website link with your course, because I think there are people who would be very interested in participating in that. So with that, we'll bring this discussion to a close. knowing we're going to pick up the pieces in just a little bit. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you so much, Celina, and thank you all for listening today to Building My Legacy podcast.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.